So Clueless, the 90s cult classic movie, has turned 30 this year, despite poor Rudd not aging a day. And in honour of Clueless's 30th birthday and the 210th birthday of the novel Emma by Jane Austen, on which the movie is based, I thought we could honour both stories today by doing a little comparison of how similar the stories are and how good of a modern retelling Clueless actually was. Throughout this video, I am going to be referring to Emma in terms of the novel Emma, but just for comparing scenes, I'm going to be using clips from the 2020 version. So both Clueless and Emma are based on privileged white women who are meddling busybodies in their small communities. They're both popular, they're both well loved, and they both get their kicks by sort of meddling in other people's lives and by matchmaking other people. In terms of the general setup of Clueless versus Emma, they are both motherless. They both have mothers that passed away when they were young, and they are both doted on by their fathers. That is the same. In Clueless, Cher, aka Emma Woodhouse, is an only child, whereas in Emma, she has a sister. In Clueless, Cher's sort of small community is based on the fact that she is in high school, so the community is basically just the other kids that go to her high school, whereas in Emma, they're in a small town called Highbury. I think the way they included the small community in Clueless was really clever, despite putting them in a huge city like LA. The way they actually down-aged Cher. In the book, Emma is 21. In Clueless, Cher is 15 going on 16. So I don't think they needed to age her down that much, but I think it's clever to set it in a school because you still get that small community, even though she doesn't live in a small town. Obviously, one of the biggest changes off the bat between Clueless and Emma is just the fact that she's not called Emma. I'm not really sure why they did that, because it's not like Emma's an old-fashioned name or anything. It almost feels like they changed the name purely to have the whole gag of Cher and Dionne.
Dionne and I were both named after great singers of the past who now do infomercials.
In fact, the only name that stays the same between Emma and Clueless is Elton. Elton is the only name that is kept the same. Every other person's name is changed, which kind of makes sense. If the only name they changed was Emma, was the lead character, it would be a bit weird. So the fact that they've changed basically everyone's name, I guess, do one or do the other. Another thing in the setup to mention as well is they obviously both have very loving, doting fathers who think that their daughter is amazing and perfect. In Emma, her dad is a huge hypochondriac who never really wants to leave the house and is also always scared that there's going to be a draft and that someone's going to get sick, and he sees the doctor all the time.
Do you feel it? A chill draft. A chill and sickly draft.
Whereas he's sort of the opposite in Clueless. In Clueless, he's a really busy lawyer who overworks, and Cher almost looks out for his health. Whereas in Emma, he's obsessed with his own health. But that doesn't really affect the story. They're just nuances of character. They don't actually really affect the plot. The main role of the father to sort of be a support for the main character remains the same. So next up in Clueless, we are introduced to Dionne, who is Cher's best friend. In the comparison between Emma and Clueless, one of the biggest changes is sort of either characters are omitted completely or they're sort of like an amalgamation of multiple characters. I'll get into those characters as they come up in the plot. So Dionne is not a character that exists in the novel of Emma. However, at the beginning of Emma, her best friend and former governess, Miss Taylor, gets married because Emma matchmakes her with a man called Mr. Weston. And the novel begins with Miss Taylor becoming Mrs. Weston and getting married. I think Dionne is the sort of best friend confidant part of the character of Miss Taylor / Mrs Weston. And I think Dionne is sort of mashed together with the character Miss Geist, who's the teacher that Cher and Dionne matchmake. So the character of Mrs Weston in Emma, I think, is sort of separated into two components, and those two components are Dionne and Miss Geist. And not only that, like Dionne is with Murray in Clueless, and they set up Miss Geist and Mr Hall. I think both of those couples actually are really just Mr and Mrs Weston. Dionne and Murray take the sort of friendship component of that couple, and Miss Geist and Mr Hall make up the sort of elders that the heroine matchmakes. So in Clueless, we do then meet a few of the key characters at school, including like Travis and Elton and Amber. But I will get onto them in a sec, because first let's talk about Josh, Paul Rudd, aka Mr Knightley. So in the 90s and noughties, when this film was quite new, I don't remember anyone ever thinking that the relationship, familial connection between Cher and Josh was that weird or that icky or considered it incest. But I feel like modern audiences, like people who've never seen Clueless and are now watching it for the first time, are watching it and thinking this is incest, this is gross. I don't know if it's just because I grew up on this movie, so I'm the relationship is just kind of ingrained in my brain as being normal, but I don't consider it incest or weird that they are ex-step siblings. I feel like the people who do think it's a really weird step sibling romance have clearly never read an actual step sibling romance book. And if you want a weirder version of a step-sibling romance, then go and just watch My Fault or Culpa Mia. So if we look at the facts, you were barely even married and it was 5 years ago.
We're hardly even married to his mother, and that was 5 years ago. Why do I have to see Josh?
In the movie, Cher is 15 going on 16. Josh, I'm not sure we actually find out his actual age, but it's safe to say 18, but probably 19. So let's just, for argument's sake, say there's a 3-year age gap. The fact that they were barely even married implies less than a year, probably honestly 6 to 9 month marriage. Yes, they would have been under the same roof.
Why don't you just come here? You can have your old room.
But as someone who has a brother 3 years older than her, the least we ever had to do with each other in our entire lives was probably this age. When you're kids, you play with each other you're both kids together, and then you're both just adults, and the age difference means nothing. I don't think these two would have had anything to do with each other. Your dad marries someone and some random boy 3 years older than you moves in. You wouldn't hang out. You'd only see each other if you passed each other in the hallway, school runs and meal times, or if they were forced to go out on a family outing together. So I don't consider it incest or icky. Feel free to disagree, but steer clear of step-sibling romance novels and Culpa Mia if you think this is weird. So in Emma, their relationship is not step-siblings. I would say they're actually further removed in Emma, and I don't really know why they changed it. They could have just kept it the same. I mean, I know why they changed it. It's because in Clueless, they're only children, but they could have just had siblings. I don't think it would have affected the story that much to just give them a sibling that no longer lives at home and they never see. But in Emma, Knightley and Emma are related because their siblings are married to each other. So Emma's sister is married to Mr. Knightley's brother. So that makes them siblings-in-law? But not even, because their sibling is the other's sibling-in-law. Do you refer to, I don't know, I don't have one. I only have one brother and his wife is an only child. So I don't have the equivalent. But it's like if my sister-in-law had a brother that I fell in love with. It would be weird, but you're not related by blood at all. I know some people who had grandparents. They had one set of grandparents, but it was from both sides of the family. That was weird, but I guess it's the equivalent. So their parents got married, had 3 kids, and then in later life, I don't know which way around it is, but one of the grandparents, the grandmother died, and on the other side, the grandfather died, and then those 2 single grandparents got married. Kind of a similar thing. It's weird, but no one's gonna be born with 12 toes. Do you know what I mean? So the main sort of catalyst of the plot in both Emma and Clueless is that she's like obsessed with matchmaking other people. In Emma, like I say, at the very start, you don't see it. It like opens up explaining that they've just got married, but she matchmakes her best friend and ex-governess, Miss Taylor, with a man called Mr. Weston. In Clueless, at the beginning of the movie, Cher and Dionne matchmake Miss Geist and Mr. Hall. So those two sort of events are very mirroring of each other. And I think in both Emma and in Clueless, she is matchmaking sort of for her own personal ego, and like she really shows in both Emma and in Clueless that her success in matchmaking makes her think she knows everything. She thinks she's always going to succeed. She thinks she knows better than other people in like who should be romantically with someone else, which is important because it's the same sort of character arc in both, which is important to be a good adaptation. The importance is not necessarily the finer details, but it's keeping the core story and the core character arc, and Clueless does that. So in Clueless, after Dionne and Cher matchmake Miss Geist and Mr. Hall, we get a new girl at school who is Ty. Brittany Murphy, R.I.P. Queen. So Ty is the equivalent for a very central character in Emma, which is Harriet Smith. So in Emma, Harriet is this girl where she doesn't know who her parents are. She's sort of lower in social class, and Emma takes her on as this sort of projector. She's going to elevate her in society and matchmake her with a rich man, so she's going to sort of marry up. And in Clueless, it's obviously Ty is just like a kind of like stoner grunge girl, and they decide they're going to make friends with her as a project and give her a makeover and make her like cool and popular. Which brings us to Ty/Harriet's key love interest, which is in Clueless Travis, and in Emma it is Robert Martin. So in Emma, Robert Martin is like a kind of poor farmer boy that Harriet knew from the summer just past. And in Clueless, Travis is just sort of like a stoner, cool skater guy who obviously is very well matched to Ty's actual natural personality before Cher interferes and meddles and gives her a makeover to sort of be this popular valley girl. Again, so far so good. I think this portrayal of these characters and how they're adapted into a modern setting in high school is like perfection. But quite early on in Emma, Robert Martin actually proposes marriage to Harriet, and due to Emma's sort of judgment and influence, Harriet refuses Robert Martin's proposal. Obviously, these characters are like 16 in Clueless and they're in school, so obviously no proposal happens, but Cher basically just tells Ty, like,
No respectable girl actually dates them. You don't want to start off on the wrong foot now, do you?
And Ty, taken under Cher's wing, like, takes that influence on board and does not date Travis. In Emma as well, Mr. Knightley is also somewhat of a friend to Robert Martin because Robert Martin works on Mr. Knightley's farm, or Robert Martin's farm is on Mr. Knightley's land, whichever way it is. Basically, Mr. Knightley is Robert Martin's sort of landlord, which leads to the like iconic moment and an iconic argument in Emma, which is...
You saw her answer. You wrote her answer. This is your doing.
Obviously, because it's not a refused proposal and because Josh and Travis don't know each other, we don't get that juicy gem, but it does make sense within the plot of Clueless to miss out that vital scene. And although we don't get the "you wrote her answer" scene, we do get sort of mirroring, I guess, just sort of judgments from Mr. Knightley and from Josh, where it's more just sort of a judgment of Cher's influence over Ty, rather than like the added judgment of you made her turn down this marriage that would have been good for her. So they do still do a good job of mirroring essences of those relationships and those plot points, but we do have a little bit of a difference just because of the circumstances of the characters being aged down at school and the characters being, in the 1800s. So the next important character we need to talk about that I think is just done to perfection in Clueless is Elton/Mr. Elton. So in Emma, Mr. Elton is the sort of eligible bachelor of the town/village, and he is a vicar. And obviously in Clueless, Elton is just sort of the popular hot guy at school that Cher wants to set tie up with. Both are just so spot on, and like I said before, the scenes had to sort of change due to the last plot point, whereas I feel like with Elton, they're like spot on, beat for beat. So in Emma, when Emma decides she's going to set up Harriet and Mr. Elton, she paints a portrait of Harriet, and Mr. Elton is there while she's painting, and he's like, oh, it's so amazing, you've captured her essence so well, like I must have this painting, basically. And obviously Emma and Harriet take that to mean that Mr. Elton finds Harriet beautiful and that he wants the painting of Harriet because it's Harriet. And then we have the exact scene play out in a modern setting in Clueless, where Cher takes photos of Ty, and then Elton is like, yeah, she looks beautiful, give me a copy of this photo, and he hangs it in his locker. And obviously Cher and Ty take that to mean that he thinks Ty is beautiful and he wants a photo of her, when really he wants it because Cher was the photographer. Stunning. Couldn't have thought of a better way to just do that scene in a modern setting. Stunning. And then the next important scene we have with Elton is obviously we find out that Elton is actually in love with Cher. Mr. Elton is actually in love with Emma. So in Emma, this happens after a ball. Mr. Elton rides in a carriage with Emma, and in the carriage he reveals that he's in love with her, and she's like, what about Harriet? And he's like, why would I be with Harriet? Like, Harriet is not of my social standing. Like, I've obviously always been in love with you, Emma. And she refuses him. And again, absolutely done to modernised perfection in Clueless. After a party, Cher gets a ride with Elton in the car, and in the car, Elton is like, tries to come on to her, and she's like, what about Ty? And he's like, why would I go with Ty? That makes no sense. Me and you make sense. I'm in love with you, basically. And she refuses him, and then she gets kicked out and gets mugged. Obviously, that's an addition, and it's done so that she can then have a bit of a scene with Josh, and we can witness Josh with another girl. Great additions, obviously added in from Emma. We don't get that, but I think it's a really good way to add in the relationship dynamic scenes between Josh and Cher in that movie. But yeah, all the Elton stuff, spot on, beautiful. Like, I couldn't think of a better way to just like beat for beat modernise it. So in Emma, after Emma refuses Mr. Elton, he goes to London, and then when he comes back from London, he suddenly has a wife. So he just went to London and like rebound married someone because he was so upset that he got rejected by Emma. And we don't necessarily have a beat for beat character for Mrs. Elton, but I would say Mrs. Elton is Amber. I think Amber is a combination of two characters, who I will get onto in a second, but somewhat of Amber's character is Mrs. Elton.
Look, he's going with Amber?
In Emma, Mrs. Elton is this character who's very like snobbish and everyone in Highbury sort of hates, and Amber, although she's sort of a frenemy of Cher, I guess, but a lot of people find her annoying. Like, she has really obnoxious outfits and stuff. So I do think Amber really fits the character of Mrs. Elton quite well. So after all the Elton arc is pretty much put to bed, we then get the arrival of Christian in Clueless, or Frank Churchill in Emma. Both characters are to be Emma's somewhat love interest. Again, sort of done to perfection in the fact that in both Emma and Clueless, she's never interested in anyone for herself until this character enters. They're both very like suave and charming, and like the man that Emma or Cher assumes will be like her perfect match. And there are twists in both of these stories with this character. I actually love the way they modernised it in Clueless. So the twist in Clueless is obviously that he's gay. In Emma, it's much more convoluted than that. So in Emma, he is secretly in love with and engaged to Emma's basically lifelong rival, Jane Fairfax. So Jane Fairfax is the other part of Amber's character, I think, in the sense that they're sort of frenemies. So in Emma and Jane Fairfax are the same age. They were born in Highbury, but people compare them a lot. And in that sense, they're sort of like rivals, but they're very like nice to each other. So they're sort of frenemies, which is sort of exactly what Cher and Amber's relationship is. So I do think Amber is a combination of both Mrs Elton and Jane Fairfax. Another character that is missing from Clueless that's quite an important character in Emma is Jane Fairfax's aunt, Miss Bates. There's also a Mrs Bates, who's Miss Bates' mother. Both of those characters are missed out of Clueless, and it does make sense to me why they are. They're not needed, especially as Christian is gay, not secretly engaged to someone else. It does make sense that Jane Fairfax is not included as well, because the main point of Christian and Frank Churchill's character is for character development for Cher/Emma. It's to show that she's not right about everything. She doesn't actually just have this sixth sense to know who everyone is in love with, and to show that she is clueless. So the next scene in Clueless is when Cher goes to a party with Christian, and Ty is also there. And then Josh, out of sort of jealousy and protection of how much he dislikes Christian, goes to the party as well. And then at this party, Ty is sort of left out alone because Cher's with Christian. And so as a sense of goodwill, Josh hangs out with Ty and dances with her. Again, absolutely stunning modernisation of a very, very important scene in Emma, which is one of the sort of shifting points, I think, for Emma in the novel, where she realises like just how kind Mr. Knightley is, and how respectful he is compared to like Mr. Elton, because in the novel it's like Mr. Elton refuses to dance with Harriet. Elton is at the party in Clueless, but like they don't interact with him, they just see him with Amber. But other than that, it is pretty much exactly the same in Emma. So they go to a ball and no one will ask Harriet to dance. Mr. Knightley sees that no one will ask her to dance, and so Mr. Knightley asks her and dances with Harriet. And Emma is really grateful to him for being there for her friend and dancing with her. Also, as a result of both of these mirroring scenes, it also causes Harriet or Ty to develop feelings for Josh/Mr. Knightley. Again, stunning modern adaptation of this scene. Couldn't have done it better, I don't think. The only thing that is different in the novel, after Mr. Knightley dances with Harriet, he then dances with Emma. In the 2020 movie version, this is like the best scene in the whole movie. In the novel, it's not actually played out on screen. You just see them agree to dance and then the chapter ends. In the 2020 movie, if you haven't seen it, absolute perfection of a scene. In Clueless, this doesn't happen either. What happens is development of their relationship, though, in the same way that they drive home together, they decide to get the lawyer's food, and then they hang out on the couch. So yeah, both really key scenes in the movie and the novel, both done really well. So next in both Clueless and Emma, our heroines start to, well, I guess in Emma, she just kind of starts romantically going off Frank Churchill a bit. In Clueless, obviously, she finds out that he's gay and they just decide to be like really good friends. But in Clueless, Ty, Christian and Cher all go to the mall, and Ty obviously nearly dies when some guys like hang her over the balcony, and Christian runs in and saves her life. Again, stunning, absolute perfection, an exact mirror of what happens in Emma, which what happens in Emma is Harriet is attacked in the woods by gypsies. Hilarious sentence. And Frank Churchill saves her and carries her because she's hurt her foot. And from this, in the novel, Emma then takes that to mean that Harriet is now in love with Frank Churchill, which Emma is fine with. And Emma's like, yes, well, we'll set up Harriet and Frank Churchill now. Obviously in Clueless, that doesn't happen because, as I said, Christian is gay. What happens instead, basically, is just Ty basically becomes super popular and sort of out-popularizes, if such a word exists, Cher. So obviously due to the changes there, those things are different, but I think it works still just as well. Like I say, the essence of the story remains the same, and the key turning points in the story are the same. So due to the changes I already said, which is basically the removal of a lot of characters, a key scene in Emma that is missed out of Clueless is a scene where they all go for a picnic on Box Hill. It wouldn't make sense, I don't think, to do it in Clueless, and it isn't really needed, but it is a hugely important scene in Emma. So in Emma, they all go for this picnic, and Emma basically, in sort of showing off to Frank Churchill, insults Miss Bates. Again, Miss Bates does not exist in Clueless. Unless, I suppose, Miss Bates could be the house cleaner that she insults, in a sense. Oh, actually, you know what it is? Yeah. I think that is the equivalent of Box Hill. It's like a slight moment in the movie, but Cher insults the housekeeper and then Josh calls her out on it. But it's like a very slight bicker. It's not a huge blown out argument like it is in Emma. So in Emma, Mr. Knightley tells her off basically for being rude to Miss Bates, and Emma starts crying. Again, it's like a hugely important scene in Emma, but because of like how they set up Clueless, even though that scene is missing, it's fine. Like, it's not noticeably missing from the story, and it wouldn't make sense to have had it in. But you do get slightly that essence of Cher being sort of ignorant and a little unintentionally mean, and Josh calling her out on it.
Such a brat.
And instead, I guess, of the big Box Hill incident causing Emma's sort of downfall, where she then has to go and apologise to Miss Bates and make amends that way, in Clueless, Cher's sort of downfall comes more from the argument she has with Ty. So she fails her driving test, and then when Ty reveals she's into Josh and they have an argument, and Ty's like, "You're a virgin who can't drive." In Emma, the two characters do have a bit of a fallout, but it's obviously nothing like it is in Clueless. So Cher's downfall is more from that fallout with Ty, whereas in Emma, her downfall's a little bit more from the incidents that happen at Box Hill. So again, two different ways of telling that part of the character arc, but it still makes sense with the circumstances, and it doesn't change the essence of the character's arc. But following both events in Emma and in Clueless, where Ty reveals she's into Josh and Emma and Harriet reveals she's into Mr. Knightley, that is when Emma and Cher have this revelation of,
Oh my god. I love Josh.
so despite a little bit of differences at this part of the story due to like Christian being gay, not with someone else, and not having the story set up for the Box Hill incident, they sort of, I guess, divert a bit there, but then they get back on track when they both have this revelation that they are in love with Josh, Mr. Knightley. So after these revelations in both Emma and Clueless, so in Clueless, Cher then goes to like volunteer in charity and help that way, like stop meddling with people and be selfless by volunteering and making herself better. In doing this, she also makes up with Ty at the skating competition, and when she sees Ty and Travis together, she realises how good of a couple they actually are, and she's like, I'm not going to meddle or interfere anymore. Like, they should be together if they want to be together. Again, that mirrors pretty much exactly what happens in Emma, where after the fallout at Box Hill, she apologises to Miss Bates, and then she learns that Robert Martin has proposed to Harriet again, and this time she has accepted him, and she's obviously very happy about that. She wants her friend to be happy and in love, and also it's probably quite selfishly though, because she herself is in love with Mr. Knightley. So I think she's mainly glad that Harriet, her friend, is not in love with Mr. Knightley so that she is free to be. But in both circumstances, the relationship that at the start they like frowned upon, they were like, no, you like that's dating down. You can't be with Robert Martin. You can't be with Travis. By the end, we've had the development of character where Emma and Cher now both accept that like that is who my friend is in love with and therefore she should be with that man. Now we get to the end of the movie. So in Clueless, that is obviously, they have a bit of an argument with that lawyer when they're flirting, and then Cher and Josh get together and kiss. Woo! And in Emma, obviously a very similar thing. Mr. Knightley reveals his love for Emma and says the absolutely most beautifully written love confession, maybe in literary history, which is,
If I loved you less, then I might be able to talk about it more.
honestly, that line is just like so swoon-worthy. It's absolute perfection. I can't believe Jane Austen wrote that. Like, oh my God, imagine if someone said that to you. I kind of wish they kept it in Clueless. And obviously they don't keep any other line for line quotes in Clueless that I've noticed anyway. And yeah, it probably would be weird for a 19-year-old to say, if I loved you less, maybe I could talk about it more. But maybe they could have done like an equivalent to like 90s teenager would say it. Either way, they don't. I wish they would have. It's still just as good in Clueless as it is in Emma when Mr. Knightley and Emma get together and Josh and Cher get together. And both stories end with a wedding. In Emma, that wedding is Emma's and Mr. Knightley's. In Clueless, naturally because they're teenagers, that wedding is Miss Geist and Mr. Hall's. But they're both happily ever afters at weddings, and in Clueless we get that kiss with absolutely loads of tongue, which was just ingrained into my memory since I was a little kid watching that movie. But like all in all, there are a lot of modern retellings of like classic novels, especially of like Austen and Shakespeare and stuff, especially in the 90s and noughties. Like rom-coms did this a lot in the 90s and noughties. So there are a lot of other examples of modern retellings. I think Clueless is probably one of, if not the most spot on modern retellings. A lot of it, I think, has to do with the fact that Jane Austen and Emma, I mean, obviously it's a lot more modern than the likes of Shakespeare, which is something that's commonly retold in modern settings. But like Jane Austen's stories are so timeless. Like if you look at Emma, which is 210 years old, and you look at Clueless, which is 30 years old, they've aged well because they both just have the same essence of the story, which is don't meddle in other people's business. And it's like a commentary on class. It's a commentary on popularity and social standing and judging others based on their position in society. And I think that's the kind of story that I don't see getting old anytime soon. I think that's why Jane Austen is just so loved still to this day, and her stories still just work because her stories are just about humanity and about like the core fundamental parts of being human and having relationships with other people. And those things never get old. They haven't got old in Clueless. Like the 90s slang and stuff has got old, but the core story and the core message of the story is timeless, I think. And I think that Jane Austen would have absolutely loved Clueless. So, R.I.P. Jane, what a baddie. That's it for today, I think. Let me know what you think and if there's any sort of key differences or similarities between Emma and Clueless that I missed. If you liked this video, then you might like this video I did where I just compare and rank all the Jane Austen adaptations. Obviously heavily biased. A lot of people in the comments disagree with me, a lot agree. But I do talk about all 4 versions of Emma that was done recently. So if you want to talk more about Emma, you can go to that video next. But that's it for today. Okay, bye.